Welcome to Genesis Unleashed, the show where we unleash the truth of Genesis.
And pose 15 questions evolutionists have a hard time explaining.
Welcome to Genesis Unleashed. On this program, we're going to look at, once again, the Question Evolution Flyer, and we're on question number 3.
Right.
Question number 3. So I'm just going to read it out of the flyer here. How could mutations, accidental copying mistakes, in brackets, DNA letters, exchanged, deleted, or added, genes duplicated, chromosome inversions, etc., create the huge volumes of information in the DNA of living things?
Right.
That is question number 3.
Right.
And then there's some additional details. How could such errors create 3 billion letters of DNA information to change a microbe into a microbiologist? There is information on how to make proteins and also for controlling their use. Much like a cookbook contains the ingredients as well as instructions for how and when to use them. Without one or the other, one without the other is useless. See, for example, creation.com/meta information for more details on that particular dilemma.
Right.
Mutations are known for their destructive effects, including over 1,000 human diseases such as hemophilia. Rarely are they even helpful. But how can scrambling existing DNA information create a new biochemical pathway or nanomachines with many components to make goo-to-you evolution possible? For example, how did the 32-component rotary motor like ATP synthase, which produces the energy currency of the cell ATP for all life, or robots like Kinesin, a postman, a delivery man essentially, that delivers parcels inside cells,
We'll
originate?
talk about him on another
And
show,
we will
sure.
do that on another program.
Yeah.
And there's another web link in the article, we'll put it up as well, creation.com/train, where Dr. Carl Whelan talks about these changes in living things. They're taking things in the wrong direction.
Right.
They're not getting better, they're getting worse. And that's really the answer to, we'll go into more detail here,
Yeah.
but that's the answer to the question.
I mean, really, the thing people need to understand right away is what a mutation is. You know, if
Yes.
you watch popular science fiction, mutations are good things. They give you special powers.
X-Men,
and all that, yeah,
right?
all that kind of stuff. But when you understand that DNA, obviously a language or code system, we've discussed this before, made up of these chemical letters, when there's spelling errors, that's what a mutation is. As DNA makes copies of itself, you get all these spelling mistakes that can occur. And really what the evolutionist is now saying is if we start off with something simple, you know, the Little Red Riding Hood, if you copy Little Red Riding Hood enough times, you make enough copies with enough spelling errors, you know, millions of times, it's going to turn into the works of Shakespeare sooner or later.
Okay.
Really, that's what you're...
seems absurd when you say it that way.
Right.
But yet it's a legitimate analogy.
Well, yeah. I mean, you get a little bit of information, turn into a whole bunch of information, and it's all got to be meaningful with punctuation and purpose and all these types of things.
Right.
So we did have some people write in and try to give answers to the question.
As with the other questions.
Yes. And so answer number 1 came back and it said, if only 8 mutations per year were passed on for 3 billion years, that gives 3 gigabytes of information, which is true.
The 3 billion DNA letters in the human genome.
Right. However, there's a challenge with this. Is you need to define that. For example, it's not just if only 8 mutations were passed on. It would have to be 8 information-gaining mutations that coded for some new function or feature or special ability that wasn't in the organism to begin with.
Right.
So if you're a bat and you don't have echolocation, and all of a sudden you have echolocation, that would be a neat new mutation because it would give you a new ability, right? If you don't have teeth and all of a sudden you get teeth through a mutation, that would be a good, beneficial mutation.
The more and more study that's done on the human genome and other animals as well.
Yeah.
The notion of junk DNA, which was popular years ago,
Yeah.
is falling by the wayside.
Gone.
Most of those 3 billion letters code for something valuable, for
That's
something
right.
important. So
yeah, I mean,
our
we're going to
response.
talk about the mutations that we see and what they actually do, and the fact that you can have beneficial mutations. But we need to define this as, you know, it would have to be 8 mutations that added genetic information that was useful and meaningful, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And you know what? That's assuming that those things actually occur, and we haven't seen it. That's the problem. I mean, you're saying this is. It's kind of like saying, well, you know, if pigs had wings, they could probably fly. I mean, I don't want to be really facetious here, but it is like saying that, because if you haven't seen it, if it's not happening, if science isn't recording that, it's just a wishful...
Yes, it's an if-then.
Yeah.
If this happens,
if
then
that
this
happened,
could be
that
true.
Could be true, and so on. So we haven't seen that. And second...
So that's our first response to that question.
That's right, we just haven't.
If you have a whole bunch of time and you have these mutations passed on generation to generation, and he said 8, did he not say?
Yep.
If only 8 mutations were passed on in 3 billion years. We need to do another show on this, but
right.
It's actually much worse than 8. It's well, 60 point mutations is the latest figure.
Right.
But that's only point mutations within the human genome. 60 per generation.
Right, that are occurring right now.
Yes.
And of course the problem is most of them...
They're not they're information destroying. They do what mutations do. They wreck things.
Right. And so if that had been happening for 3 billion years, that would have been a problem. Anyway, we'll get into that in another show.
That's right.
So the second, one of the problems is, as the population grows larger, it's harder to fix new mutations in the population. This is because of the cost of substitution. This is what they call Haldane's dilemma. And I guess we should probably spend a little bit of time here, because if
you're going to explain that.
Yeah, if people aren't familiar with it. We had Dr. Don Batten. He's a scientist with our organization, and he did an article you can check out on the website. We'll put the name up here. It's creation.com/Haldane. And now the famous evolutionist geneticist J.B.S. Haldane, he was one of the 3 founders in the field of population genetics. Now he, as an evolutionist...
He's an evolutionist, first note.
Yes, he's passed away now, but he was an evolutionist, and he noted there was a serious problem which has become known as Haldane's dilemma. Now, see, if a beneficial mutation were to occur in a population, and it's going to become fixed in that population, then it has to increase in numbers, obviously, in the population for it to progress evolutionary in an evolutionary fashion, right?
Relative to all of the other specimens in that population that don't have that beneficial mutation.
That's right, because if one of the organisms gets the beneficial mutation, well, and that's a benefit, well, that's great for that organism, but that organism is going to die sooner or later. So unless that gene gets passed along and widely spread, it's not going to get fixed.
Evolution theory would suggest that beneficial mutation needs to wipe out, those individuals need to wipe out, or all the others need to somehow disappear.
That's right, over time.
And then evolution can progress.
But the problem with that, of course, is the rate at which that could happen is limited. As a matter of fact, the biggest limiting factors, of course, is how quickly you can procreate, right? I mean, because there's 2 ways of doing it here. If you know, they actually talked about, you know, an imaginary scenario where, let's say you've got, you know, ape-like creatures, hominids or whatever. We're not fully human yet, and you know, let's say you've got like humans, you've got a birth rate of whatever, and it takes you, let's say, 20 years to, you know, to keep making new generations and stuff like that. So if you imagine a population of 100,000 apes, these supposed, you know, progenitors of the human race, and you get a male and a female that somehow get this mutation that's beneficial. Well, number one, in order for that to get passed on, then obviously they'd have to find each other in that group of 100,000 people anyway, and pass it on. But you've got a couple of things you could do. If their offspring is going to become the mainstream with that mutation, 99,998 other ones, they've got to either disappear somewhere, or that particular mutant group has somehow got to get their you know, next generation to somehow outcompete them and outpopulate them.
Such an order of magnitude improvement over the remaining population that they just procreate and all the others die out.
Exactly. So I'm going to read this just so it'll make more sense to people. Okay, so you've got an imaginary population. You've got 100,000 apes, and you get this male and female. They both receive a mutation so beneficial that they out-survived everybody else. All the rest of the population died out, and then the surviving pair had enough offspring to replenish the population in 1 generation. Now, this is a supposed scenario, of course, but this is what would have to happen. If you repeated this imaginary situation every generation, every 20 years, for 10 million years, more, which of course is the supposed time since the last common ancestor, supposedly of apes and humans, that would mean that you'd have 500,000 beneficial mutations that could be added to the population. But even with this completely unrealistic scenario, which maximizes evolutionary progress, only about 0.02% of the human genome would be generated.
Oops.
It's a totally unrealistic scenario, right? And you keep having to, because the mutation that occurs, I mean, if you're going to have it accumulate, it keeps needing to occur in the same group. But if you've got a mutation here and a mutation here and a mutation here, somehow you've got to bring all those mutations together to keep stacking up this.
So the dilemma is, even given the most favorable conditions for evolution,
right,
the results are nowhere near what they need to be.
That's right, because that's only 0.02 of the human genome. Right. And considering that the difference between the DNA of a human and a chimp, our supposed closest living relative, which that's another story we'll get into sometime. But anyway, even that is supposedly greater than 5%. Well, obviously 0.02 to 5%, that's a huge problem. So Haldane's dilemma basically has not been solved. That's what Don's article was about. There have been some evolutionists that have tried to, there wasn't much done. It was talked about a little bit in the 60s. But then it was kind of largely ignored by most evolutionists until 1992, when an evolutionist, George C. Williams, remarked this: "The time has come for renewed discussion and experimental attack on Haldane's dilemma." So basically, this is a problem that, well, let's not talk about it too much. All of a sudden, this evolutionist makes the statement here: well, we need to attack Haldane's dilemma. Why?
So they want to try and get through the dilemma, this dilemma for evolution.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so he wanted experimental attack. He wanted some observational proof that this wasn't true. And so of course we carry a book called The Biotic Message by Walter James Ramin, and he did an extensive I guess restudy, you could say, on Haldane's dilemma, and really pointed out what the problem was, because most of the criticisms that came against Haldane's dilemma, they were kind of criticizing, okay, well, you don't really need to get rid of all those other things. You just need to concentrate on the creatures that get the mutation and stuff like that. But what Ramin pointed out, and he had a great article, we have it online, you can check out too, it's called, just go to creation.com/cost. The article title was "Cost Theory and the Cost of Substitution, a Clarification." What Ramin really pointed out was this cost of substitution. You're really talking about how quickly the mutants, the new creatures with new abilities, how quickly they can procreate. It's not so much to do with how you wipe out the other 98,000 ones. It's how you actually get those. Okay, so you finally get a new mutation. You finally get a couple that's got these genes, and they can start passing them on. Or if you've only got one, and only one can pass on the gene, how quickly could that overtake the population? Meanwhile, all these other mutations are happening. A lot of them bad. That's what we observe in things. So anyway. The bottom line is Haldane's dilemma has not been solved. It's actually gotten worse, and you can check out those two articles to get more information.
Yeah, that's a quick summary. There's of course a lot more details that we're not going to do. You can look at those web links: creation.com/Haldane and creation.com/cost. Okay, we're still on answer number one, supposed answer number one.
Right, if those 8 mutations were passed on for 3 billion years, it gives you 3 gigabytes of information.
So we've got a third response to that one answer. Third, it assumes that the mutations that will be fixed are the sort that create new structures, new things like wings and feathers and horns and beak or whatever. But it's becoming the consensus even among evolutionists that mutations are like spelling mistakes in an instruction manual, where you're going in and randomly mutating things. These changes can be adaptive, they can be helpful to survival, or
they can
beneficial.
Be
we can use that term. That's not a no-no for us to use that term. There are beneficial mutations in certain circumstances, but they're still heading in the wrong direction. Even the beneficial mutations that have been published in the scientific literature, they're still information-deleting mutations. Sometimes these mutations produce, even though they delete information, they still produce some really interesting features,
Right.
But it's going the wrong direction to try to answer this question of how do you get the DNA code? How do you get that information?
So if you've got a small island and it's quite windy and you've got a group of beetles on the island, and some of them, they're winged beetles, and sometimes that's bad because they fly around and then the wind blows and they blow them out to sea and they die.
Yeah.
You get a mutation in the population, their wings don't get expressed, or let's say they're deleted from the genome. Well, that's a benefit to the beetle in that situation. So all the wingless beetles...
It's a survival advantage.
That's right.
We could call it a benefit.
It's a
because
benefit
it's a survival advantage.
in that particular situation. So survival of the fittest, natural selection is going to occur because of this mutation.
Right.
Right. You select all the winged beetles out of the population. The wingless beetles, they're the ones that live. You know, but if the water level drops in that area and all those wingless beetles get to the mainland where there's all sorts of snakes and bugs and lizards that are going to eat them, I'd rather be a winged beetle. So if you go from a winged beetle to a wingless beetle, you're not really evolving.
It's beneficial in the sense that it produces a survival advantage.
Right.
That's great. No one's disputing that. But it's not beneficial in the sense of generating information. The beetles have lost the ability to produce wings.
Yeah. And so for this, you know, again, like we mentioned, if we were observing these things all the time, I mean, there are a lot of scientists observing genetics today. And so, you know, even with all the random, you know, information and mutations that are happening, even if you could show one or two beneficial mutations that actually, you know, did actually increase something or cause something new to happen, even if you could show one or two, which they don't have any you know, hands down cases of that, in order for evolution to have occurred, you would have needed billions and billions and billions of these things to occur.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, and that's not what we've seen.
So there's more details on some of these things. We've written up some of that example with the winged beetles that we just talked about. That was an actual observed example. We didn't just make that up.
Yep.
And you can there's links to these things and things like antibiotic resistance, blind fish in caves, and so on. Examples of where mutations have produced an advantage. And if you go to creation.com/QE, or question evolution, creation.com/QE, that'll take you to the page that has all 15 of the questions for evolutionists. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, it has our rebuttals, the content that we're talking about on the show.
So we got other supposed answers?
Yes, answer number 2. Let's move right along. Computer models have shown how mutations can lead to large-scale change. That's one of the responses that we got to this. Computer models have demonstrated this beyond a shadow of a doubt.
For example, Richard Dawkins, right? He has the weasel program.
The weasel
program. He thinks it is a weasel. I think that's the phrase he's looking for.
You're trying to get to a particular phrase and so on.
Yeah.
But all of those computer simulations, every single one, they're artificial situations. They don't duplicate what's actually going on in nature.
Right.
You might as well argue that the computer game Spore is a good example of is support for evolution,
which was programmed by intelligent designers, of course.
Yes, Spore. If you've never heard of that game, it's where you start off as a microbe and so on. You have a microbe, and then you can direct the evolution to try and get into some creature or something. But that's all of those things, and Dawkins' weasel program. If you want more information on that, just go to creation.com/selection. That'll take you to the Q&A page that has many articles on natural selection and how natural selection is a fact. We have observed that. You observe how
it fits the creationist model perfectly.
It fits the creation model perfectly if you start with all the information there in the beginning and then you select out for various traits and so on, or climate selects out in this case.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to get a computer program that simulates nature and simulates these mutations to try to build up the human genome or the genome of something else.
That simulates what science is observing today, which is what our foundation
and then extrapolates back in history, given you can put in mutation rates. You can download this from the internet, actually. Yep. It's called Mendel's Accountant. And if you go to creation.com/Sanford, John Sanford is one of the developers of this software. And
the inventor of the gene gun as well.
The gene gun, yeah. And he was a former evolutionist and is no more. Mm-hmm. And we'll do an interview with him at some point. There's another show we need to do. Yep. So many ideas. Creation.com/Sanford, and you can find a link there to Mendel's account and download the program for yourself. Experiment with how to try to build up the human genome. The most favorable conditions that you put in there all lead to massive destruction of the genome.
I mean, you watch evolutionists try to justify their position by creating, using computer software and computers to come up with these ideas. I mean, computers themselves are sophisticated. But anyway, so you're simulating, okay, we're looking for this target sentence. We think it is a weasel. And so you randomly, you know, you flip these letters around, but as soon as you get an M at the first one, it goes, oh, and it stops and it fixes it there. Even before you've got the entire sequence.
So the software has a goal in mind already.
That's right. But with mutations should be completely random. So even if you got the M in place, and you got the E, and you got all the way, oh, what if that one's switched around again?
Yeah.
See, you're actually programming the computer falsely to save what you want. But the problem is, with genes, you need all these letters of information to all be complete and then get expressed, and then they're a benefit to the organism. Getting the right letter inside before it's been expressed, that's no help. So these are false simulations of what evolution would need to
That's right. Another thing we can mention is it's not the amount of change that we're discussing. When we talk about beneficial mutations and so on, which we admit there are beneficial mutations.
Of course.
And it's not the amount of change. Within dogs, there's a huge range of different types of dogs.
Yep.
Or cabbages in the plant world. You have broccoli, cauliflower,
Brussels sprouts,
the little ones, Brussels sprouts,
yeah.
and then you have cabbage, the big cabbage.
Right.
All the same group,
yep.
the same created kind, baramine we would say from the Hebrew.
Say, yeah.
But the change between a broccoli and a head of cabbage, that's a huge change.
Right.
They don't look anything like each other.
They taste different too.
And they taste different. And most people
don't like either one.
They taste the same. people don't like them. But it's not the amount of change, it's the type of change.
Right.
Right? So I guess that's a point we can make as well.
Yep.
There's a third answer. You want to do that one?
Sure. Here was an objection that said, using words such as accidental and mistakes is misleading and misses the point entirely. Well, this is a kind of, again, it's one of those, you know, supposed answers that you're really missing the point. Number one, scientists, evolutionary scientists themselves use words like that.
They use
mistakes,
those terms.
accidental,
yes.
Because it's a random process. Even if Richard Dawkins or evolutionists want to argue that natural selection is actually a guided process because it selects the most favorite and all that, the mutation process itself is an accidental copying mistake. That's
yes.
what it is. I mean, you can use all sorts of different terms, but when you get down to brass tacks, that's what it is. And evolutionary scientists are using these phrases themselves. So it just, I mean, yeah. Carl Sagan, right?
Carl Sagan, yeah, we can read that quote. That's in the rebuttal. You can go to creation.com/QE and go to the rebuttals there.
He said, mutations occur at random and are most uniformly harmful. It is rare that a precision machine is improved by a random change in the instructions for making it. Well, he's an evolutionist. He believes evolution occurred through that process, but he's admitting, okay, why is he admitting
He's using
that?
those same terms.
Right, and he's admitting it because that's what we're observing.
Like how can random changes be anything but accidental?
Right.
And
yeah. Try it on your car
mistakes.
motor while it's running and
random.
See how that works for you. Anyway, so far our evolutionist friends have not really come up with any really good answers for the questions that we're posing.
Yeah, the 15 questions that are in the Question Evolution flyer,
yeah.
The responses that we're getting back don't really address the legitimate problems that are listed in this flyer.